And up first we have Jared, who will be presenting on the roles of neoliberalism in two different indigenous movements in Latin America. And yeah, I'll let him say the rest.
Alright, yeah, thank you for the introduction.
Questions at the end. We'll have like
Okay.
5 to 10 minutes for each.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so hi, like she said, I'm Jared Carls, and I last semester did this research paper for Professor Jim Collins' class on the effects of neoliberalism on the Mapuche people of Chile and the Zapatista indigenous movement in Mexico. And my main goal with this, so my main central question is, how did neoliberalism affect these movements? Both happening around the same period of time in the 1990s. And I wanted to see how they compare in, I wanted to see how they compared in their origins, the methods used by the movements, and the outcomes of the movements. So I'm going to go through and show you how I analyzed. First, I'll talk about what neoliberalism is, what kind of policies I was looking at to see how it affected them, and then I will tell you about a little bit about the movements, and then the outcomes. So just a little bit of background information. So the regions I'm talking about are here in Chile, so it's kind of in the middle. It's the Araucanian region. And then the Zapatistas are mainly in Chiapas here. So that's where they both took place. And then, so what is neoliberalism? It's not what we think about today with conservatism and liberalism. It's more of an economic policy. So it really emphasizes the rule of market, the market being above all else, the taking out of government of like business transactions and things, deregulation, privatization, cutting public expenditures for social programs, like healthcare and stuff like that. And this saying over here, it values individual responsibility over the public good. So I'm mainly looking at policies that fit into one of these bullet points to see if they influenced at all these indigenous movements. So how am I about doing my research? Mainly looking at literature, articles, scholarly articles, comparing. We talked a lot in class about some of the topics that we were talking about, so class lectures, and that's how I formulated all my research. So to go a little bit of background into Mexico. This is common for both, so I'll just say this up front. So like colonialism, really the indigenous communities of all Latin American countries were pretty marginalized up until they gained independence. Then some were still, even then, really, really marginalized, and there's a huge caste system of a really prevalent caste system of the like white Europeans, the mestizos, and the indigenous. So that was all present in all Latin American countries up until around the 1910s, I want to say, with the Mexican Revolution. That was the first time that like indigenous people got some hope, because I forgot to put it up here, but Lázaro Cárdenas became president, and it was seen as a win for the indigenous people at the time, because he was going to implement this ejido system. And this ejido system was basically, they would have government lands, or like public lands, excuse me. They would have public lands that people could farm off of and make a living, that were communal and cooperative for indigenous people and people all throughout Mexico. But sadly, so kind of similar to how in the U.S., like some laws don't really get implemented until they pass through the courts of the states because we have state rights. It's kind of a similar thing. Like it was like back then, it was like, this is what we're gonna do, but it didn't really get to the Chiapas region. Like it didn't get ratified. It wasn't really a thing. I want to bring this up just because it's kind of relevant. Have any of you seen Roma?
Not yet. I
Not
want
yet?
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It pretty much shows like you nodded. So so it showed like the Roma neighborhood in Mexico City, and then where the indigenous woman went to go find her boyfriend. Like that really showed like the inequality that was present like through the latter half of the 20th century. Excuse me. So that was just a fun movie that's out recently that kind of touched on this topic. But then, so they were kind of waiting for this Ejido system to take place in Chiapas, and then it wasn't until the Carlos Salinas in 1982 came and made a bunch of decisions that the Zapatistas became extremely frustrated, and it was kind of these couple things were the key things that kind of broke the camel's back, if you would say, for their tolerance of inequality. So one of them was NAFTA. NAFTA was a big reason why their political uprising, this indigenous uprising happened. It opened up for free trade between the Canada, U.S., and Mexico. And that was just really beneficial to the big corporations that could now go into Chiapas region and like take over all the farms that were Chiapas because they'd be able to buy them out with all their money and then create more profit for the Mexican economy. And then too, the ending of the Ejido system was done under Salinas. So they passed this amendment of Article 27. And so they had hope for a little bit there since Cardenas was in office that like someday it'll come to Chiapas. And then with this passing of this amendment, it stopped all all continuation of the Ejido system. So then this possibility was no longer available to them, no longer like a hope. Because then they were buying out land for the government was, and then they were going to sell it to these big corporations for deforestation, also agriculture practices, and then of course the growth of inequality at that point was just too much. So the movement itself was this Ejército Zapatista por la Liberación Nacional formed, and they began, I think it was January 1st, 1994, they began attacking all these nearby towns. And I have a little picture here. This is recently. It's more so towns that are under Zapatista control currently, but this is the area in which they like went around and attacked like the neighboring towns to gain control from the elites that were like looking to buy the land and stuff. So they went around attacking it, and then the government they were so out of the Chiapas region, so they were able to do this because there wasn't too much of a government presence there, and the police force there was corrupt as well. So they were able to form this army and go about, and they tried government intervention, and it didn't work. And I even talk about in my paper some examples of like the government after Salinas left office, the government trying to work with them to give them kind of more of the rights that they wanted, but then every attempt at bipartisanship, I guess you'd say, or trying to come together, kind of failed. So like immediately there was a military response.